So first, I want to say we are recording this, and that recording is already running. My name is Larry Milliken. I am the manager of scholarly communications for the Drexel University Libraries, and we have with us today Emily Chenette, who is the deputy editor-in-chief of PLOS ONE. Emily studied biochemistry at Columbia University as an undergraduate, went on to earn her PhD in genetics and molecular biology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And then she completed postdoctoral research at Duke University, where she analyzed gene expression signatures in lung cancer. Emily has always loved science writing, as we all do, and in policy, and left the bench to pursue an editorial career in 2007. Before joining PLOS ONE, she held editorial positions at Nature Cell Biology and the Febs Journal. So I want to welcome Emily, who will be joining us from overseas. It's great to have her. And Emily, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you for coming. I'm so happy to be here as the University Libraries celebrate Open Access Week. And I'm going to talk to you today about good science and about how open access supports the practice of good science. I'll start off by talking about what we mean when we talk about good science, and then I'm going to discuss some of the benefits to authors and researchers and go over roadblocks to implementing good science. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about how individuals, sponsors, institutions, and journals can all play a part in supporting good science. What is good science? In our view, good science is selective for rigor, ethics, integrity, and credibility. So it fundamentally means that the research is open and accessible, it's reproducible, it was conducted ethically, and that it contributes to the base of academic knowledge. So how does good science benefit authors and researchers? There have been some really interesting studies about this, actually. 2 studies published in PLOS ONE have linked data availability to increased citation rates. So one from this year found an association between articles that mention data available in a repository and up to a quarter higher citation impact on average. And another from about 10 years ago, 2007, reported that publicly available data was associated with nearly a 70% increase in citations. And this was independent of journal impact factor, the data publication, or the author country of origin. Good science is also associated with rigor. Another study in PLOS ONE that looked at psychology papers this time related the willingness to share research data to the strength of the evidence and the quality of reporting of statistical results. The authors of this research concluded that the reluctance to share data was associated with weaker evidence and a higher prevalence of apparent errors in reporting of stats results. Good science is also associated with trust. A perspective article in Nature Human Behavior put forth a manifesto for reproducible science, arguing that without transparency, claims only achieve credibility based on trust in the confidence or authority of the originator. Finally, good science can lead to opportunities for collaboration. A key finding from the 2019 report from Digital Science on the ascent of open access is that countries that have invested in open access have typically increased their level of international collaboration. But there are operational, technological, and ideological roadblocks on the path towards good science, and these can generally be separated into 2 areas: lack of desire and lack of ability. So what do I mean by lack of desire? Generally, this means a research culture that prioritizes impact over rigor or incentivizes prestige over reproducibility or accessibility. When we talk about open access, it means that researchers don't know about open access options, or they know about them but don't support or believe in them, or they know about them and believe in them, but they don't have anyone pushing them to support open access or open science. And these barriers can arise at the individual, institutional, or the funder level, which also means that individuals, institutions, and funders can take steps to resolve them. Additionally, a lack of ability is a barrier to good science. And by this, I mean that researchers don't have the support that they need to make their research open. So for example, the journal doesn't offer open access options, or the options that are provided are unclear and confusing. You know, all of the various Creative Commons licenses, for example, without the appropriate levels of explanation. Authors may also not have funds available to pay to make their research open access, or they may not have the time that they need to format and annotate data sets so that they can be shared and deposited in an open database. These barriers arrive at the individual, institutional, funder, and journal level, and so we all have parts to play to resolve these problems. So how can the scientific community come together to support good science? For individuals, this can mean resolving to share your data or publish open access. You can use a site like Think, Check, Submit to ensure that you're not submitting to a predatory journal. And of course, you can participate in events like this to learn more about open access and to be able to ask questions. Funders can support good science via their policies and their money. Authors and institutes will require both policies and funding to go open. Policies counteract the lack of desire, funding counteracts the lack of ability. Institutions should develop reward structures that are focused on good science and open research. They'll need to evaluate researchers based on the total contribution to research throughout the life cycle of a project. So this means asking whether researchers pre-register their research, they publish their protocols and post their studies as preprints, whether they share materials and code, whether they deposit their research data so that others can build upon the research foundations that they have built. And this goes beyond analyzing research outputs by the name of the journal that a paper is published in. Institutions also need to support open access in whatever ways they can, which means moving away from subscriptions to support open access publishing, supporting authors with the information that they need and access that they need to be able to do open science, and developing policies for evaluating researchers on the basis of the total research output. So you notice that this slide covers just individuals, funders, and institutions. What roles do journals have to play in supporting good science? And so that's where I'd like to talk for a minute about PLOS. So at PLOS, supporting open science is a core part of our mission, and that means supporting authors throughout the research life cycle, from before their paper is submitted, through the review process, at publication, and then after publication as well. So what does this look like in practice? Before submitting to PLOS, we encourage authors to deposit manuscripts in a preprint server. We have bidirectional links set up with a preprint server bioarchive. Authors who post their work on medRxiv can submit their work directly to us as well. This bidirectional link with bioarchive also provides an important filtering feature for the preprint server, as we only send manuscripts on to them for posting that meet minimal standards. We also encourage pre-registration of research via the registered report article type on PLOS Biology and PLOS ONE. For those who are unfamiliar, a registered report splits the research output into two contributions. So there's the stage 1 protocol, which is the study that the authors are proposing to do, and then the stage 2 report of the research project. Any stage 1 protocol that is reviewed and accepted receives an automatic accept in principle decision for the stage 2 study, provided that the work is completed as described in the protocol. The article type was launched on PLOS ONE in January of this year. We've seen 8 protocols published so far, with many more in the pipeline. It'll be really exciting when we see the first set of stage 2 reports coming in. We've also developed guidelines and publication criteria that emphasize rigor. So for PLOS ONE, that's been baked into the journal from day one, but even the more selective journals, such as PLOS Biology, are taking proactive steps towards emphasizing rigor and the importance of the research question over novelty or the perceived impact of the results. PLOS also supports comprehensive reporting criteria. We help develop a minimal standards framework that established minimal reporting expectations for materials, including data and code, design, analysis, and reporting. This is the MDAR checklist. PLOS Biology participated in a trial along with 12 other journals across many different publishers for this MDAR checklist to aid authors in complying with journal policies. We've also participated in trials to gauge the effectiveness of other reporting standards. For example, the Icarus randomized control trial that looked at whether journal requested completion of an ARRIVE checklist for in vivo animal experiments improves full compliance with the guidelines. The results suggested that requesting a completed ARRIVE checklist didn't improve compliance, actually. So at PLOS ONE, we've taken a more stringent approach towards ensuring that authors report the key parts of the ARRIVE checklist in their methods. And this was something that was recommended by the Icarus trial. We've also introduced strong encouragement for authors to link to research resource identifiers, RRIDs, for all relevant resources, and also strongly encourage deposition of materials in repositories. So once authors submit their manuscripts to us, we work with them and our wonderful board of academic editors and reviewers to validate good science. A team of PhD level staff editors with subject expertise read every single manuscript submission, and for a journal like PLOS ONE, that's 120 or so a day, and determine if it meets our policies on research ethics, disclosure of conflict of interest, data availability, and other key concerns. Potentially controversial or harmful papers, so this includes research on non-human primates, for example, or dual-use research of concern, like bioweapons, are subjected to additional scrutiny. This can involve escalating to an external group of experts or consulting in detail with a member of our board before a decision is made to send a manuscript for further review. All PLOS journals also have a scooping protection policy, so we encourage so-called close seconds, replication studies, and negative results. This supports our emphasis on research question and rigor over the perceived impact of the results. We support good science in publication too. Authors can opt in to making the reviews and feedback from the editor publicly available as part of the published paper. So this is the transparent peer review option. Reviewers who have opted into disclosing their identities during the review process will also be named in the reports, which helps the reviewers receive credit for their work. We also select papers to press release. These aren't always the so-called hot papers, but they can be controversial or unconventional findings where a press release can help frame the discussion around the findings. So, for example, press releasing a retrospective study can avoid language that implies causality because the study design cannot test causation. We think that press releases are a really important tool to control so-called fake news and overinterpretation and hyping of results. Finally, we occasionally commission perspective articles and formal comments that add important context to papers that we publish. These are written by experts who may or may not have been involved in the review process and serve as an independent platform for discussing the strengths and the limitations of new research. Finally, PLOS is committed to good science after publication as well. We support post-publication commenting on all of our published articles. All comments must abide by our good commenting guidelines about using constructive language, disclosing potential conflicts of interest, and escalating all concerns about experimental data or potential misconduct to journal staff. Journal staff then also work with authors to ensure the comments that are left on the papers are responded to. So we try to engage in a constructive process between commenters and authors on papers that are published. We also provide article level metrics on all papers that we publish, which report the number of page views, the number of citations, shares, and saves across social media, as well as any traditional media coverage. We're also incredibly fortunate to have a dedicated publication ethics team who works together with journal staff to investigate any issues that arise in accordance with COPE guidelines and reach a resolution. We place an emphasis in writing detailed and clear correction and retraction notices and ensuring that the process of correcting or retracting a paper is data-driven and is transparent. So that's all I wanted to talk to you today about, sharing our perspective on how open access supports good science. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. That was really great. So I want to open it up now for any questions that we have from our audience. And go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat and then I'll read it.
Hi, Emily. This is Janice. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. I had a question about the type of minimal standards that you mentioned for supporting preprints, and could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. So when we're screening for bioRxiv, for example, we ensure that that the paper described makes a contribution to literature. So it's not pseudoscience, it's actual scientific research that addresses a research question. And with the coronavirus pandemic, we're also very careful about filtering out papers that make some sort of pharmacologic claim or new drug treatments or things like that, because we understand they are preprints. The scientific community probably has a pretty good understanding of what a preprint means, but just to ensure that research that could be misused is not made publicly available before it's reviewed.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, this is Tim. I had a question about, I had a question about declaring the research agenda. Is that the same as the preprint, or you said something about publishing your research agenda?
Yeah, are we talking about pre-registered reports? Is that, yeah, registered reports?
You might have said that. I thought you used the word agenda, but that's, it's kind of like declaring where your research is going. I wondered how that works with claiming, credit for the new idea, the new research agenda.
Yeah, so I think so registered reports come even before preprints, right? And so they both, so preprints are after you've done the study and you've written up the paper. And I think it's a great way to to show that you have this completed data set and you've done this research before it's published, to allow other people to build on the results. But pre-registration happens even before you start collecting data, before you start recruiting participants for a study. And it just talks about the study that you propose to do. So at that point, you get reviewers to weigh in on the strength of the study design, and they point out any weaknesses or flaws in the experimental methods. You go off and conduct the research as described in the protocol, and it's accepted for publication before you even start collecting data if the protocol was accepted. So it's a way of signaling interest in an area and kind of planting your flag and saying this is the study that I'm going to do, and it opens you up for collaboration, and also could potentially make it much easier to have the eventual paper published if it's negative findings or something that a journal doesn't deem to be of high enough impact. You go to a more selective.
So, but there's still some competitive process, weeding. Not every pre-registered proposal is accepted. I couldn't invite my undergraduates to have you vet their term paper project topics. No, okay.
I mean, possibly for a journal like PLOS ONE, we have a very encompassing view of what contributes to research, right? So it has to contribute to the base of academic knowledge is our first publication criterion. For a journal like PLOS Biology, which also has the pre-registered report option, they do judge, they are more selective, but they're going to judge on the interest of the research question. And there are no results at that time. So it can't be that it's an interesting new finding, it's an interesting question. So it moves away from the results to the approach.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think that's a really interesting idea, and I hope that trend continues. It seems like a great way. I know I talked to especially graduate students who are concerned about getting scooped. So it's obviously a great way to avoid that. But the other thing that we talk to people is they're looking for collaborators. And other than going out and finding them, having something that is out there with the question, you could find people who want to sign up for it. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, in another couple of years, we'll actually have the data to know what happens to the author list, right? Between the round one and the stage one and the stage two. Does it attract more participation? So I think that's a really neat area that we'll see more of in the next couple of years.
Hi, my name is Jai Bhatt. I'm the engineering librarian. And my question deals with sort of huge amount of data being that people are trying to publish after the COVID situation. And the question is, how do you manage evaluating this, making sure that it is the right, reliable data before it is published in PLOS?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as you were aware, there have been a couple of high-profile retractions about data that may not have been all it cracked up to be. And so we combat this in part by, our data availability policy. We expect that all data will be shared if an article is accepted for publication. It doesn't address the question about during the review process, but it does ensure that after the review process, there are additional eyes on the data set to make sure that it is robust, it is reliable, and that the work is reproducible. During publication, we kind of get at this by ensuring that everyone declares potential conflicts of interest. So if there are commercial conflicts of interest at play, that these are disclosed, and that the academic editor and reviewers can judge whether or not there's an agenda, or to make sure that the conclusions are appropriately supported by the data. But generally speaking, the data availability policy, I feel like, acts as a deterrent, knowing that all data have to be out there and made publicly available for people who might be trying to game the system or manipulate a data set. But yeah, it's obviously not perfect, but it's a good tool that we have.
And that leads me to also think about an earlier concept that came out several years ago by one of the scientists here at Drexel, called open notebook science. And what it used to do was they were archiving all the failed experiments, right? So you can create a data set of failed data or manipulated data and make that available also in the open access, so that people can see that this is not right and we should not rely on that, and we should work towards correcting that data before it is published.
So are you talking about negative results or null
Yes,
results?
negative results, failed results, manipulated data, whatever that is not correct.
I think that's a really important point, because a lot of negative and null results never see the light of day, and especially for things like clinical trials that are really expensive, you want to prevent additional people from being recruited into these if you can help. In animal studies too, where we'd like to prevent the loss of animal life as far as possible. I think that's key. And some journals take a more encompassing view towards publishing, these sorts of negative and null results. Manipulated data is a different story.
Right.
Journals publish, but we strongly encourage even the negative and null results to be made available.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I was also interested in the transparent peer review. That's something that I've kind of watched over the years, and I'm a historian. It happens far less in history than in other fields. But transparent peer review, peer-to-peer review, open peer review, kind of all of that stuff just seems like a great way of, kind of actualizing that, the kind of old SOV, scholarship as a conversation. It's like, well, let's make that conversation, more visible and get more of those voices out there. But how have you been able to promote that with faculty, and I guess even with reviewers?
Yeah, so the reviewers, sorry, I'm really having trouble with my voice today. The reviewers can't opt in or opt out of transparent peer review. It's the authors that have that choice right as their article is published. So we only ask them to make the decision at that stage. But the reviewers can opt in and opt out of signing their names. And so far, I think we had a little study on this, probably about a year after the policy was launched. And I think it was in the single digits of reviewers who said that they had changed their mind and that they wouldn't review, knowing that there was the possibility that the review would be made public. So reviewers, by and large, are very happy to support the policy, knowing that they have some control over whether or not their name is associated with the comments or not. And it's a really great way for people to gain credit for reviews that they write if they choose to sign the reviews. I also like to think that it helps improve scientific discourse, knowing that there's the chance that the comments will be made public, right? Making sure that the conversation about a paper is constructive and clear, and that the review process is as concise as possible, that everything is found within the first round of review. I think it does set a slightly higher bar, knowing that daylight will be shown on the decision letters. So we've had a very positive experience with it so far. We've had a fairly good uptake. I don't have the numbers off of the top of my head, but it had been tried, probably about a decade ago, and the uptake was much lower. And I think the community has shifted more towards embracing this sort of model, which is great.
Thanks.
Hi again, Emily. Thanks again for your helpful insights and sharing this with us. So I'm wondering how, this is a question to get your insights on this, on helping people with the transition from models of highest value placed on peer-reviewed, expensive, paywalled publications in their field to being involved more in the open access and open science. So a question recently that came up, which I thought is probably indicative of some of our faculty's nervousness, is if one submits a preprint, let's say, to one of your publications or anywhere, or puts it in a repository, how to deal with that then when the final paper you're ready to put into a publication that in your field still is under copyright and requirements for acceptance that requires a statement that you haven't published it yet. So what's the relationship there from the open access early stage sharing of research findings as well as actual data and the like, and continuing it on in next stages of the process?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So in terms of journal stances on preprints, at least in the STM and the science, technology, medicine, many of the journals now have gone to saying that preprints don't constitute previous publication. So preprints are allowed. It doesn't, you're not scooping yourself. And they'll go on and publish the paper in a closed, in a subscription only journal. So that's starting to change. I think this speaks to the lack of ability, right? Until there is a change in the way that I think it has to come from the funders, right? That the funders are mandating that the research outputs be published in, open access journals, not behind a paywall, and provide the money needed for this. I don't think you're going to see a shift, because I think that the other bits are in place. I think that there's goodwill amongst the research community to make their data sets open. I think there's enough research at this point to suggest that it's a good thing for researchers on balance in terms of collaboration and, citations and trust and those things that I went over earlier. But, we don't have policies in place that mandate it. And I think that is going to be what has to change, because right now there's not enough of a driver for open access yet.
Have you explored the other sort of world of research that is driven by, and it's really legitimate research and it's important, but it's driven by business interests? And so, of course, the government funding and requirements for having open science is there, but in a lot of applied fields and partnerships, particularly as you look at the development in the medical field of whatever next virus we're talking about in trials and all that, how to try to engage the academic contributions to those and pulling out the science from that with what is proprietary.
Yeah.
Needed.
Yeah. So the data availability policy actually helps with this too, because a lot of private companies are unwilling or unable, given the terms of patent, applications and things like that, to share their data. And so for journals like in the PLOS family, it's difficult for pharma companies, for example, which may not be able to share their data, to be able to make that available. But we've actually found that by going and talking to authors, talking to the IRBs, talking to the data access committees, that we can often find a middle ground here. But we have a very clearly defined scope too, so that marketing research, for example, is outside the scope of the journal, because we don't consider that it contributes to the base of academic knowledge. And that's kind of it's a judgment call made by the in-house staff editors about what does and does not contribute to academic knowledge. But we are on the lookout for conflicts of interest and the financial disclosures that suggest that there is a hidden agenda behind some of the papers that we might see. And the funding sources, I think, are very clear in illuminating whether or not there might be an agenda here. For example, we don't accept papers that are funded by tobacco companies because of the long-standing conflict of interest in those cases. Does that kind of get to the question that you were asking?
Thanks a lot. It's a interesting new field, particularly as we're all addressing different, and I think the patent arena is one of them, but I think there's also other relationships that are developing for funding coming from government resources and or grants and all. So thanks a lot. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're muted.
My turn. So do we have any other questions out there? Anyone have something that they want to discuss?
I have one question. What's the magic word that helps faculty to just get on board with open access journals? What's the elevator speech?
I know.
The 3 points on the one slide that will just hit them right there, and they'll convert to looking at this instead of their other journals.
Yeah, I think that totally depends on the individual's motivations, right? Why are they in science? Why are they in research? Is it do they want citations to their papers? Because open access clearly correlates with increased citation. Is it that they want to be perceived as, a trustworthy source of information, because that also correlates, open access correlates with increased trust as well. I think that also, especially in the clinical fields, these can be potentially life-saving, situations where the ability of patients and clinicians to get access to literature could inform treatment decisions that, if it's paywalled and possibly the hospital doesn't have a subscription, can result in people not having access to treatment. I think that it can be a very important clinical decision as well. But I think it really totally depends on motivation. And so I struggle to come up with like a sound bite that you can use.
Yeah. On the clinical side, well, I've heard studies that say, from the date of a journal publication to broad adoption by the medical profession is like 20 years. I maybe I'm getting the dates wrong, but it's years for it to filter into the medical practice. And I'm thinking anything that can shorten that cycle, and any accelerators. I liked page level metrics and the alt metrics and such, and a lot, so much more publicity is driven by those means than whatever publisher promotion that might go on as a paid activity. So I'm just trying to think of like making the most of that adoption cycle rationale. And but I think you have obviously you've mentioned that everyone's going to have their own sweet spot, and we just have to analyze that, I think, a little better. So anyway, thank you for indulging that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think when I'm talking with faculty from fields that, especially non-STEM fields where there isn't necessarily a funder requirement to put something into available to the public, the tenure and promotion question is one of the highest kind of hurdles that people have to kind of overcome before they start thinking about open access. There was a department that I was talking with, and I won't say which, where they have a tiered list of journals that they want their tenure track faculty to publish in, and it goes from kind of excellent down to less desirable. And there are open access journals included in that list, but it's kind of a minority. So partly it's the conversation of, how you can kind of open up that mindset beyond you must publish here and here and here and not there, to, I don't know, really finding the best place for your article and what you want from it. I don't know how you view those things, or if you do outreach to universities or researchers and how to discuss those issues.
Yeah, that is the tricky one, right? Is that the system for evaluating research is not traditionally based on the total contribution to total research outputs, right? From the pre-registered study protocol all the way through that data set that was shared at the end of the research project. It's mostly just that paper with that journal title and possibly the number of citations, right? And so that is a slow change, trying to convince universities, and other institutions to look at that corpus of output and how it can be used in different ways, and how it supports, science and research, aside from just looking at that one paper. That's an ongoing process. But as I said earlier too, I think funders have a really important role to play. So the NIH, when it first took up that embargo policy, gosh, it was probably 15 years ago now, a long time ago, about the 6-month embargo policy, that caused huge ripples in publishing, right? Because everything was closed, everything was behind the paywall. Now, all of a sudden, all of the NIH-funded research is publicly available. You have the rise of things like PubMed Central and other ways of distributing that accepted manuscript. So I think that's been really disruptive, but it's been a bit stagnant, especially in the US. So Europe has the Plan S right now that's kind of going through the work that is a major disruptor, but it's kind of a small pool of funders who have signed on. But if we get other initiatives like that will strongly move the needle towards open access, I think that it will reach a tipping point at some point where the university's institutions will maybe start to shift the way that they evaluate the research output if there's money behind that.
Right.
And that is what I'm finding it quite challenging, and especially in the engineering fields, when the question of intellectual property, patents, who publishes first, kind of high impact journals, all that equations making it quite difficult in that region. And so trying to, I don't know how we can inspire them to go for the open access.
Yeah, I think that's tricky, but I think about how things have changed in the past 10 years, and I don't think anyone could have predicted where we would be today.
And many of this also the research is funded by NSF and other agencies which required open access at some point.
Yes, yeah.
So the question is, how do we assess that whatever funding agencies have made those grants, those articles are still coming in open access? How do we know that they are published?
How are they published? Oh, the funders will.
They will. They'll make sure. They do.
They do.
That's good. That's great. I'm sure that they should do that.
Yeah.
So continuing on this line, I'm wondering, and I think one of the articles, some of the research that you cited you're doing would be useful to have a site for it. It's the relationship of not so much the outcome as the publication, but the impact on being able to obtain more research funds. And I think that's a heavy indicator, even when you look at ranking the category rankings, the R1 and R2, it's really around not so much your impact and how much was published or how impactful the research was, but how much revenue does the institution bring in. So I think you had one thing there that was showing nicely that the greater it's a line of logic that it takes a little bit to explain to people. But if you had something that could help make institutions as well as the researchers realize that greater discovery, greater access, shapes your future research, but it also has an impact on the revenue, the potential for getting more revenue. And with that, I'm wondering if you've seen anything or doing any exploration of how the agencies are actually weighing the criteria for either having deposit, a research data management plan that really is implemented, that really matters, that you are going to have your output, whether it's data or publication, in an open, accessible, fair repository or stream. I know years ago, having a conversation with some of the NSF reviewers, they have nothing that they're guiding their reviewers to really look at that. So that was really a discouragement. We have all this, thing. So I'm wondering if you've seen any changes or what the trend is in that end of it.
Yeah, I haven't, but I'm not entirely sure that I'm really well placed to spot changes in this. But the one thing that we have heard a little bit more chatter about recently that I think is really interesting, and we have one of these examples on the books right now, is called the Funder Journal Partnership. So, for example, we have a partnership with Children's Tumor Foundation, where this is through the registered report framework, we review the stage 1 protocols, and what we accept for publication, the study for publication, gets funded. And so it's an interesting way of attaching research output to funding and making sure that the viable research projects are funded. And we've gone through, I think we've done 3 rounds with CTF so far. We've published the first stage 2 report that arose from this, which is really nicely done. It's a very, very small project, but I think that things like this kind of can maybe get towards that of having an open access output, ensuring that the money is there for the project, and it removes kind of the headaches and the logistics. If you have the funding, you have the eventual paper accepted, and it's open access. I think that's a really interesting proposal. So I'd like to see more of that, for example.
Could you repeat the name of the project?
Yeah, so this is Children's Tumor Foundation, and it's their drug discovery, I'm blanking on the full name, but it's the DDIRR funding mechanism.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has anything else, yeah, I guess I'll kind of make a last call. And if not, I want to thank Emily for joining us and presenting such a wonderful talk. It was really very interesting for me, and definitely really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you so
Emily,
much
this is
for-
Brad. I just wanted to thank you so much for speaking and appreciate your assistance with our Open Access Week activities.
Great. I am so happy to be here. I think it's been a great conversation. I appreciate all of the wonderful questions and so happy that you asked us to participate.
Thanks so much.
Open Access Week.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Have a great morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. And thanks everyone who attended. As we mentioned at the start, this has been recorded, and the recording will be available at some point. I'm not exactly sure how, but we'll figure that out. We also do have 2 more events. We have Professor Deborah Clegg, who's one of Drexel's own. She is the Associate Dean of Research for the College of Nursing and Health Professions, and she'll be joining us Wednesday at 2 p.m. And on Thursday, we have Dr. Ted Bergstrom from UC Santa Barbara, who will be joining us. So 2 more opportunities to hear good discussion about open access and ask questions and all of that fun. Thank you all for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.